Hello, hello. Happy Thursday. How y'all doing? So today we are starting a sequence on different synthesizers. I've instructed you to get Helm. This is what we're using today. It's free software. If you don't have it yet, there's a link below here on under today's class. I've chosen this not because it's the best sounding synth, but because it's really well laid out and designed and clear. And it's free, so you don't have to have Ableton Suite in order to have a synthesizer to play with. There are lots of good free VST synths. Some sound better than this. This sounds fine though. But you can go looking. There's lots of cool synthesizers out there. But yeah, again, I picked this one for pedagogical reasons. All synths like this are pretty much the same. Thanks. How's my volume now? Better, better? Cool. Let me say all that again. Today we are going to learn how to use a synthesizer, and we're going to use a free VST called Helm. There's a link down below under today's class. If you want to go grab that, download it, I'll give you a minute to get started. But I've chosen this because it's pedagogically really useful. It's very, very clear how everything is laid out, how signal flow works. There's great visualizations of these things. And because synths of this type, most synths are this type, it's a subtractive synth. I'll talk more about that in a minute. But once you learn one, you can learn the others really easily. It's just a function of how the interface works. Each synth has little things that they do differently, but in general, the basic principles are there, and the basic principles in Helm are really clear. So this is a subtractive synth. There's a couple of different kinds of synthesis. The earliest type of synthesis from the German radio studios right after the war, all the first experiments were done with additive synthesis. So like early Stockhausen pieces, the real first pieces that were totally synthesized were done with additive synthesis. Additive synthesis means you have basically a sine wave generator, and you can make you have lots of sine wave generators, and you add them together to make more complex sounds. Subtractive synthesis involves making much more complex, rich sounds at the beginning. Rather than adding a whole bunch of oscillators together, you just take like two oscillators and mix them and do different things to them to make their signal more rich and interesting. And then you subtract from there with filters to shape the sound that you want. So I'm going to give those of you, if you are joining a little late and getting Helm now, I'm going to give you another second before I get started. If you don't have a MIDI keyboard, you're going to want to be playing lots of notes and things. If you don't have a MIDI keyboard, you'll want to make a couple of MIDI regions. Maybe one that's just like a long tone. And then as you play with different kinds of material, you might want to write arpeggiations or chords or something. But I'm going to be playing on a MIDI keyboard. Once you install Helm, it should come up under plugins. Audio units, mat title, Helm. Let's see. Helm. Let me look at that process again so I can just do it alongside you. Here is the package. You open it up, continue, and I think it just installs it in the right place. So yeah, if you don't see it showing up, you can quit and reopen live, and if you still don't see it showing up, you can rescan your plugins with rescan here under Preferences, Plugins. Yeah, it may be in different ones of these folders, VST, VST3. You can just search up here for Helm and it'll pop up. Check out the chat. Windows users, make sure you get 64-bit. So if worse comes to worse and you're not able to get this installed this time, you'll still learn a lot by watching. Of course, tweaking, playing around, doing it yourself is the best way to learn things, but what we're covering today are basic principles of how synths of this type work. So if you have Serum, you can do this in Serum. If you have I don't know, Operator's a little more like an additive synth, but similar. Analog, Wavetable, slightly different, but a lot of these things are the same. LFOs, oscillators, LFOs, envelopes. These basic things that we're going to cover are in common with lots and lots of synths. Yeah, let me show you my preferences again in case they're different from yours. Plugins, use VST2 system folders and use VST3 system folders. Probably the Helm installer installed it into your standard system folder. But if this isn't turned on, then it's not going to look there. Well, this is a fine digression as people are getting their Helms engaged. Oh yeah, thanks. This is the kind of feedback I need. So I'll zoom this display. Unfortunately, I can't make Helm any bigger. That's not true. I sure can. Okay. So while people are getting that installed, we could do a little history digression. So after World War II, there was the first flowering of electronic music devices, and they were all pretty much owned by radio studios. And actually in Europe, in a couple of key places, radio studios hired avant-garde composers to figure out what to do with all of this new technology and create new art forms and create new programming. So those studios were the WDR in Germany, the Westdeutscher Rundfunk, the BBC Radiophonic Workshop was really important in this, and the one in France, yeah, there's one in France as well, where they did a lot of collage work. So the collage sampling tradition comes out of the French school after the war. Synthesis comes out of the German tradition. And a really important piece of really early synthesizer music that uses additive synthesis is Stockhausen's Studi 2. And I remember seeing this as a paper score in college. I went to the music library and found it, and this is the synthesis chart of it, and it was all scored out on paper and then realized in the tools that they had. So down here are envelopes of volume. So we're going to talk about envelopes today. This is a loud volume getting soft, a soft volume getting loud, and then these are frequency bands. So all of the tones in here are resonating, and then all of the tones in this band. So this is like our EQ chart spun on its, rotated. So it sounded, oh, you actually aren't going to hear anything because of the way my sound is routed. So I recommend, if you were curious, to check out Stockhausen Studi 2 for some early electronic music inspiration. And while we're here, there's a similar piece with a similar kind of score done at the same studio by my favorite composer, Ligeti Articulation. And it's like the wet human natural animal version of kind of analog to Stockhausen's like space music from the future piece. So I will pop this link in the chat, and then let's get started with Helm. Stockhausen was the composer in residence at WDR for a long time, so I guessed that Octophony was done there, but I'm not for sure. Okay, so that's Studi 2. There's your history lesson for the day. Okay, so let's get started with Helm. If you don't have this working yet, I apologize for throwing you a curveball. Just watch today. You'll learn a lot. You can apply it to whatever you have, whatever else you want to find. Okay. The Ligeti piece was called Articulation. So the problem with additive synthesis is that you need a different sine wave generator for each tone that you want. But if you want a more complex tone, you have to have a different sine wave generator for each harmonic of that tone. So to get anything approaching the richness of a natural sound, you need many, many oscillators. And oscillators are computationally expensive. A computer has to calculate 44.1 or 48,000 samples a second, calculations a second, to create a sine wave in time. So if you put a whole bunch of those together, you run out of CPU pretty quickly. So subtractive synthesis takes a couple of oscillators and then blends them together, uses different tools to create overtones and rich sounds, and then you filter them. So I'm going to walk you through this device, one kind of conceptual unit at a time. It's also laid out visually. We're going to start up here on the left and go through here, and then second column, these two, then these two, then these three. Oh yeah, sorry. 1, 2, 3, 4. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. That's the signal flow here. And then these are a little bit like wildcards. So we're going to start and go in order of the signal flow, which is also kind of a good conceptual order. So sound starts with a sound generator. We've got oscillators. An oscillator makes oscillations. It makes waves. So this is obvious, but I'm going to say it out loud anyway, like you're hearing it for the first time. Sound is waves. You can picture this like waves in a pool. If you are sitting on the edge of the pool and you stick your hand in and you go like this, you create waves. And if you do like this really big, you make big waves. And if you do this really small, you make little waves. The speaker cone on your speaker is actually like a hand. It can push forward and it can pull back. And you tell it where to go over and over really, really fast to make sound. So you give it the number 1 and it pushes all the way out, and you give it the number -1 and it pulls all the way back. And you give it 0 and it's at rest in between. So it's flexing according to numbers that you're sending it. This oscillator graph sends a series of numbers to the speaker cone. It starts with 0 and it goes up to 1, and then it goes to -1 and up. So if you can picture the speaker cone pushing waves in the air, it's actually going out and back in a smooth line. Let's give a listen to a sine wave. That is not. Okay. So this is the path, really, of the speaker cone making waves in the air. And so these resemble the waves that are actually in the air. Keep an eye on this. This is going to give you the output waveform. As we change things, we'll be able to see what's different about that waveform visually. Okay, so there's a bunch of common waveform shapes, and they each have a different sound. A smooth sine wave has no overtones. The synth is very loud. Thank you. Let me turn down. Great. That's better. Feel free to adjust me more on volume. You get more overtones with a less smooth shape. So briefly, overtones are what give a pitch color. A certain pitch, like an A4, is 440 cycles a second, but it's also ringing more quietly at 880, and it's also ringing more quietly at 440 times 3, and 440 times 4, and 440 times 5. So every note that we hear is actually the sum of a whole stack of notes called the overtone series. And different proportions of those notes are what give different notes, different tones, their distinctive timbre. Their timbre is their richness, their quality. It's what makes a violin versus a trombone. So, more sharp sounds have more overtones. I'm actually going to grab an EQ8 so we can see the overtones as it's happening. So I'm just clicking on this to cycle through the shapes. Sine wave, we have a single frequency happening. But with more broken waves like this, we get many more of these overtones. And they're what contribute to the brightness and fuzziness of the sound. So go ahead and click through. Okay, first you want to turn up oscillator 1 on the mixer and turn down oscillator 2. And that's going to isolate just this sound. And you can hear the different qualities of sound that the different waveforms create. Cool. I will turn... How's that? Cool, so those are your basic shapes. Now we've got 2 oscillators, and we can get a whole range of different colors by combining them in different ways. So the simplest way to combine them is just to mix them together. So here's a combination of a sine wave and a saw wave. And you can actually see here, it actually is like a blended wave between a sine and a saw. You also have these controls below. So the big one is a transpose knob, which is like a gross tuning control. So you can stack two different notes together to get a more rich tone. You can also detune one of them. So transpose goes by half steps, and tune goes by cents, which are hundredths of a half step. So a common sound that you've heard is two saw waves mixed together, one of them detuned. So here they are exactly together. And then as I detune, I get a richer and richer sound. It's actually phase interference. They're going at slightly different rates, and so sometimes they're amplifying each other, sometimes they're subtracting from each other, and you get a more textured variable sound. Reset the synth without a preset. I think you just have to delete it from here and re-add it to get back to its preset state. Okay, I'll limit my master. I have been just turning down the volume after. I'll keep it here. Yeah, you can double click any knob to reset its value. Okay, so this is cool. We've got one wave and another wave that's detuned slightly. What if we want to do this times 10? What if we want 10 of these waves and we want them all slightly tuned away from each other? This is easily done with Unison. So I'm going to go back to one oscillator. This is saying that I have one voice. If I turn it up, here I have 5 voices. One is very simple. You start getting a chorusing effect with more of them. And it's spreading those 5 with little bits of detuning through a range of 10 cents. Again, a cent is a hundredth of a half step. So if I widen this, then it's going to widen the spread of these 5 voices to a wider pitch span. We get more and more phasing. Here I'm going to go not too wide, but go up in the number of voices. That's a kind of common dance music sound, right? The detuned saw. Cool, so let's talk about the other way that you can combine the oscillators, and that's with mod. So I'm going to simplify our sound here. The mod knob does phase modulation, which means it's using this waveform to modulate the phase of this waveform. And it's kind of a math thing. It's hard to visualize. But if you had a knob, if you had a knob for phase, and phase is where the waveform starts, like this, if you had a knob that changed the phase of this, and you had this control that knob, you end up basically with lots of interference with itself. It's doing copies of itself, but out of phase. And so certain harmonics are amplified and certain harmonics are negated by the way waveforms interact. So you can get different timbres that way. And you can see up here what's happening. And the more jagged stuff you have, the more of those high harmonics you're gonna get. The more harsh it's gonna sound and bright. Cool, so those are the oscillators. There's actually one more oscillator, which is the sub. This is by default an octave below here. So if we turn up sub on the mixer, it adds this wave below. And again, you can pick the waveform that you want. You can drop it a second octave if you want it to be 2 octaves below. And shuffle does also something with the phase, and I forget what it is, but basically it gives you more just possibilities for the tone. Oh yeah, it's like pulse width modulation. So it's taking the peak and the valley and stretching them. And as you get sharper peaks like this, you get more overtones. So looking down here, as I turn this up and I get more overtones as these peaks get sharper. And you have one more source here, which is a noise filter. Not filter, just a noise generator. So if you want to add a little white noise to it, you can do it here. White noise is going to be most prevalent up here, but it's actually white noise is equal power through the whole spectrum. That's what makes it white noise. That's kind of nice. Cool. So let's move on. These are our sound sources and how you mix them together. With the subtractive synth, we want as much possibility on the front end of creating rich sounds. Oh yeah, I got a question. Are there notes for today's class? Barely. So today's notes, I guess I haven't saved them yet. Oh, and they're not labeled right. I started writing notes and I realized that I was just typing out the manual in my own words. And so I decided to spare you that. You can go here for the information about this. Otherwise, I don't know, take your own notes. Okay, so feedback. This is the next thing in the signal flow, and it's just another tool for getting yourself more richness, more overtones, a more complex sound. I won't be doing it again this evening. This is the one time, but of course you can come back and watch this video at any time. Okay, so feedback introduces a slight delay. Turns out that if you have a really, really slight delay, like if you make a copy of the signal and you slide the next one over just a tiny, tiny bit, it creates a kind of a filter called a comb filter. The way the wave interferes with itself is actually like a moire pattern, if that's how you say it. I don't know if you know this effect. I'll bring it up here. Maybe there's a... an animation. Yeah, so it's like this. If you have two waveforms, imagine that the darks are the peaks and the whites are the valleys of these stripes, and you pass them over each other. You get these other effects that pop out as they selectively amplify and, in the case of sound, also selectively interfere with each other. And so, you know, if these are the waveforms that are creating a specific pitch, this is actually a different frequency of energy getting created. It's like it's another oscillation that adds some complexity to the tone. Same thing is happening when you take a wave and make a copy of itself and slide it over a little bit. It's related to the phase modulation that we have in the mod wheel. And this is just another way to get a similar thing. It's called a comb filter because, like, this is kind of like a comb. It takes some frequency bands and boosts them, and other frequency bands and cuts them. And they're like stripes. So anyway, long story short, basically this is a way to also add some more high overtones and richness to our source sound. There's some transposition happening as well. And you can hear that there's now kind of extra pitches in there. Okay. Okay, let's keep going. So the next thing, the next thing that happens is the filter. So you turn it on and off like this. And it's just like our auto filter that we've used a lot in Ableton. I'll give you a quick tour. There's the 12 decibel and 24 decibel version. This is just like the slope of the line. How many decibels per whatever does it fall away? This is a nice way that you can smoothly move from a high cut filter to a low cut filter, also called a low pass filter, to a high pass filter. So drive is just extra gain that happens before the filter hits. You can use this to create a little extra distortion complexity to the waveform. Envelope depth sets the frequency range, basically. So you can play with this, and this is basically like pulling this down. So you can create a shape for the filter here, but then sweep it with envelope depth. And then the last thing is key track. So the best way to represent how this works is to demonstrate here. Here I've got I'm playing a kind of a low note. And as I play higher and higher, so maybe my note is here, and I play higher and higher notes, and the fundamental frequency, well, you can see down here, the fundamental frequency is getting higher and higher. Eventually, I start coming up against my filter. And my sound starts going away. Yeah, you need to turn on this filter with this button up here, because I'm playing notes that are now outside the filter. If you turn up key track, it's actually going to move the filter to the same place wherever, regardless of what note you're playing. So now it's not an absolute filter position frequency-wise, but it is relative to the pitch. So if I play high notes, I basically get the same kind of filtering relative to the pitch that I get with the low notes. So you'll get more even action of the filter across the whole range of pitches if you turn up key track. Envelope, let's see, signal flow of a synth, just to answer a question here. Signal flow is, it's important to get a handle on just because you are visualizing what's happening and what's affecting what. I'm showing you this synth not because it's my favorite sound, but because it's really clear in those regards. Lots of synths aren't so clear, but they're worth digging into and figuring out how they're exactly working with signal flow so that you can make more informed choices as you turn knobs and dials. You can also do things at random and just find sounds that you like. But in the interest of understanding fully, yeah, signal flow is important. Okay, let's save amplitudes for envelopes for after. Let's just talk about these couple of other features that are kind of nice add-ons to that Helm has. Stutter just repeats notes. This is the rhythm. Resample, this is how often it's recording a little bit of the sound, and this is how often it's pulsing it back. This is time relative to the tempo, of course. You could also do it in seconds. Softness is just a curve. So this is a really hard attack on each one of the repetitions. Softness kind of fades each one in. So this is how one way that you can get that kind of like pumping EDM synthesizer rhythm thing. Okay, distortion. Let's talk about distortion a little more thoroughly, since it's something that comes up. We use it all the time in lots of different plugins. Distortion means how does it solve the problem when the waveform goes over 1 or over or under -1? When it exceeds its bounds, what happens to the signal? And this is a really great way to just visualize. I'm going to simplify down to, I liked this. I'm going to just hear this. Okay, so here's my sine wave. If I turn up drive, see how when the waveform gets bigger, but when it gets to the top, it gets chopped off. So this is the soft clip. It means it's chopping things off at the top with a slight rounding. That matters because remember what I said before. Hard corners, hard shapes create more overtones, more kind of like that digital clipping sound in extreme cases. They create more high, harsh overtones. So soft clip gives a little rounding. It clips off all the values that are too high, but it does it with a little rounding so you don't get those kind of harsh overtones. But there's a couple of different types, and they're all just like answers to the question, what do I do when the numbers are too big? This is a hard clip where we just chop off the top values without that smoothing. It's more harsh. Check out fold. As I fold, as I turn this up, let me do a low note so we've got slower waveforms. As you turn up fold, okay, I'll do it with drive. Okay, so as you turn it up, anything over the threshold starts just getting inverted. See how it's flipped down now? This is just another way to get more complex waveforms, which gives us more rich sounds. Oh, sorry, I didn't need the stutter on. That's really confusing things. So I'm going to turn down feedback just so we get the simplest possible tone here. Yeah, so it just folds in. And then sine fold folds in, but with a sine wave instead of with straight lines. So that's distortion. You've also got a couple of effects on Helm. You've got a delay. You know how a delay works. It's got reverb. You know how that works. Formant. Let's see. Formants are properties of the frequency spectrum distinctive to the human voice. They're basically bands of extra resonance at certain frequencies. It's the formants that make vowels different in our mouth. So this is actually a graph of an approximation of 4 different vowels. And I forget which is which, but maybe we can just hear. Maybe with distortion off, it'll be more clear. Sine wave is the wrong kind of sound to do because sine waves have no overtones. They're the simplest waves. They only exist in the fundamental. So we actually want some more complex tone. Maybe that's it. You can look in the documentation. So this just basically adds some vocal-like extra resonance to the note. Okay. I'm going to give you like 2 minutes to play around with some of these things on your own. I know I haven't given you a break in a bit, but I want to get through the rest of this as well. So I'm going to I'll give you a short break and then I'll jump back into it. So let's say 3 minutes to play. Ready, set, go. And I'll answer questions in the chat. And we're back. Before we get started again, I just want to take this moment to say hello to anybody who might be joining us for the first time today. These sessions happen 3 times a week, Tuesdays, Thursdays, Saturdays. Each one is different. You can learn more about it through all of the panels down below. If you want to keep track of what's going on, there's an email list. You can also hit the heart button above to follow this channel on Twitch. Okay, so we've got our basic sound. So one thing that makes this so far not like a real instrument, like an acoustic instrument, is that you push the note down and you get one sound, and that same sound is the sound as long as you hold down the note. I have a little oscillation going on just from interference between these different things. But in general, it's like a flat, there's no shape to the note. So to add shape to the notes, we use amplitudes. We use envelopes. So an envelope is a simple shape over time. Amplitude is another word for volume. So this is the shape of the volume over time. It's going to get soft. It's going to start soft, grow loud, plateau. This dot represents where it stays while I hold the key down. And then when I let the key down, the rest of the graph happens. So now there'll be a ramp up. It'll plateau at full volume until I let go of the key, and then it'll release. And now I let go. So this model of an amplitude envelope, or of any envelope, is super, super common. It's called ADSR, and it stands for the different stages of the envelope. A stands for attack. So this is how long does it take to reach full volume. Decay is, once it reaches full volume, how long does it take to decay to its holding volume? Sustain is a volume level, which is the holding volume. What percentage of the maximum volume is the sustaining volume? And then the release is the amount of time that it takes once you release the note to finish out the envelope. So the only tricky one I think here is thinking about decay and sustain and how they relate. So I'm going to do something that I hope will make that more clear, which is a fast attack, but a low sustain volume and a quick decay. Yeah. Okay, so here we have a fast attack, so we get to full volume right away. Then a fast decay, which takes us to a low sustain volume. This gives a nice ping at the beginning of the sound, which really mimics how lots of instruments work. You hit a note on a piano, it's really loud right at the beginning, and then the sustain is at a lower volume level. Lots of sounds begin with a striking of some kind. A drum, a guitar, it's all striking. And so that strike often has a kind of a ping. It's loudest at the beginning. If I were to turn up sustain, I get more volume at my sustaining position, but there's no extra ping at the beginning. So that's the amplitude envelope. We also have an envelope for the filter. So this is how you can create like a wah, wah to every note. Your mouth is a filter. Your throat, your voice box is an oscillator, and your mouth is a filter. So basically going wah is the same thing as adding this filter. And so the envelope on the filter is how much is this filter engaged, so we can get those kinds of articulations. We're going to get to the helmet in a minute. Helmets are for mapping, and we're going to hit that when we get to the LFO. So the filter envelope, let's say we want it to go wah. So now I have a fast opening up of the filter. So it's as if this was going according to this shape. So I had to turn up envelope depth to make this happen. Envelope depth is how much, how much distance is the envelope going to cover on our frequency spectrum when controlled by this envelope. So now I have this nice kind of opening up, wah wah sound. If it's, here it is, just to make it really clear, I'll make it slow. Filter's opening up. Same story, attack, decay to a sustained volume, which is where it stays until I let up the key, and then how much time till it closes again. Cool, so mod envelope is one more envelope that we can hook up to anything. So let's do our first mapping here, actually. So what might we want to mod over time? Like say it's this feedback. We want, when we strike the note, this knob to go from there to there. So we can do a mapping. Click on the Helm, and then just turn the knob that you want to turn in the range that you want it to turn in. So now it'll go from here to here along this shape. See how this is turning this knob? As this goes up, that turns up. So that's kind of nice. I'm going to do it a little faster. So now there's this kind of extra ring towards the beginning of my note. I'm into that. Okay, next is an LFO. So an LFO shares a lot in common with an envelope. Both are shapes over time. But whereas the envelope is a shape over time for a single note, the LFO is a repeating pattern. So LFO stands for low frequency oscillator. Yeah, Joe, the mod envelope is like automation. Actually, all of these, actually everything with a Helm, you can hook up to anything else, and it will take this shape and map it also to something else, just like you would be automating. Yeah. So LFO stands for low frequency oscillation. This is a high frequency oscillation. High frequencies are frequencies over about 20 a second. And when you oscillate something over 20 times a second, it sounds like pitch to us. 20 is about the lowest frequency that we can hear as a tone. But lower than that, we don't hear separate pitches. We don't hear pitch, we hear a rhythm. So this is an oscillation happening at a slower rate than one that would create a pitch. And it's for modulation. So modulation just meaning it's general. Whatever this shape is, we can hook it up to anything that we want. So let's find another thing that we want to do. Let's try hooking this up to envelope depth also. So I'm going to... Oh no, that'll just confuse things since we're already working with a filter here. Maybe let's map it to this. So I click the Helm, and then I just change it the amount that I want its range to be. So I'll do the whole one, and then click the Helm again. If you want to unmap something, you can just double click it while you're in mapping mode. So it's not representing this visually for us, which would be nice, but we can hear it happening, and so we can imagine it. It's going in stair steps up, like boom, 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 at this rate. Jigga, 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 jigga. So here's another LFO. Let's maybe hook it up to... what's another good... On our feedback. Let's do it on our pitch. Let's get a little pitch wobble going on here. So I don't want a lot. I maybe just want this much back and forth. So I'll grab the Helm, go a little like this, and you can already see it going. So it's taking this shape and using it to turn this knob. So I forget what poly LFO, how it's different, but you can hook it up to things in the same way. Let's maybe have it modulate how much noise there is. And let's make it be slow. So over like a 4-bar span, we'll sweep up the amount of noise and down. I think that's working. Not quite sure. Okay. Oh, yes, that's exactly right. Thank you very much. Thanks, John. Yeah, poly starts when you play a note. So it's kind of like another envelope, but it's a shape like this, and it will be the same every time you play. It'll do the same. It'll be in the same point of the arc. Cool. And then you have a step sequencer. So check this out. I'm actually going to turn these. Oh, this can change the depth of what you're doing. Step sequencer, we can hook up to anything, and rather than going smoothly through a bunch of things, it'll go through a bunch of stages. So, what could this be? I think it'll be really obvious on Formant. So, I'm gonna just make a little pattern here. It's kind of a rhythm. We can do like a... whatever this is called, yada da 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 da, like a samba. And then I'll map this to, let's do it to one of these. So again, it's not visualizing this for us, which is unfortunate, but you can hear it happening. changing values, not smoothly but quickly, through different kind of vowel shapes. Oh yeah, that's kind of talking. Cool. I'm going to just get us to the end here and spend a few more minutes. So, okay, keyboard mod is how different properties of your MIDI controller. I'm using an Arturia Mini Lab Mark II, which I like. It's cheap. It's got buttons and knobs and a keyboard. So, like velocity. Velocity is how hard you hit the note. So I'm going to try mapping velocity to this, which is the resonance of my filter. Velocity to there. So now I'm going to play soft notes getting to loud notes. Boy, I just have a lot going on here, don't I? It's hard to tell what's doing what. So that's more pingy. Let's also map velocity to the frequency range. Cool, so now if I play soft notes, it's more filtered. And if I play loud notes, it's less filtered. Soft, loud. I might want my mod wheel to control something as well, like maybe let's have mod wheel control my vibrato. So I'm actually going to make my vibrato wider. And I also want to do vibrato on this oscillator as well. And then I'll map my mod wheel to this slider. From there to there. Actually, I want to go the reverse. So I'm going to double click to reset, turn this off, set this to basically my 0 position of the mod wheel. Then turn this up. And now I can use my mod wheel. And you don't see it visualized in the changing solid line, but you see it in the motion of the dot. So here my mod wheel is down and it's flat. And as I turn up the mod wheel, I can see that oscillator, which is controlling my tuning, also change. So these are other properties. Not all controllers do them. Aftertouch is pressure after you hit the note. You can do actually changing pressure. Note, I haven't tried it. I assume that it maps low notes differently than high notes. Random just gives you different values each time you hit a key for whatever thing you hook it up to. Pitch wheel you can map to anything else. It doesn't have to be pitch. But the pitch is always going to work because that's prior to the synth. And last is this little range down here. I know I'm throwing a whole lot at you quickly, but let's just get to the end. So this defines the polyphony. If I say there's only one voice allowed, then I can only play one note at a time. This is like some leads and some basses are monophonic like this. Adding voices lets you have polyphony. So now I can have two voices, but if I play chords, I'm playing a whole chord, but it's only doing two of the notes. Cool. Pitch bend is, I presume, how wide the... Yeah, how wide the... Got it. So the pitch wheel on your controller, this is how wide that bending is. So 7th is a perfect 5th. So now if I pull down on my pitch wheel, I can go the span of a perfect 5th. Velocity track controls how much the different velocities that you play with. Velocity, again, is how fast you hit the note, basically how hard you hit the note. If you turn it all the way down, soft notes and loud notes are all the same. If you turn it all the way up, then you have a really big range between a quiet note and a loud note. If it's all the way down, I'm going to place quiet notes and loud notes, and they're all the same. Last, over here is Portamento. So Portamento means sliding between pitches. So I'm going to set it to one voice so we have a really clear Portamento situation, and I'm going to turn it on. So porta is how much time does it take to slide. Yeah, portamento is the same as glide. And there's a couple of modes. If it's on, then it slides every new note that you play. Automatic slides only if you're holding down one note while you hit the other note. So here I'm going to hold down this E flat while I play another note. And because those notes overlapped, it slid between them. But if I'm starting from nothing and play a note fresh, then it doesn't slide. And I don't know what legato does. Check the manual. Okay. Oh, there's also an arpeggiator. Hold down a chord and it will bounce through the notes in different patterns. It is just too much. I see, we just need to turn things down on the mixer. So that's the arpeggiator. Okay, so that's Helm, and that's also an introduction to all the basic components that you're going to see in whatever synth you're working with. Serum, if you're a Serum person, your sources, Serum or Wavetable in Ableton, your sources are slightly different. It's not simple oscillators, it's whole complex waves. That's what a wavetable synthesis does, has almost samples of complex waveforms as your initial sounds. But otherwise, most of these things are the same. You've got an amplitude envelope for volume curve of each note. You've got filters, you've got LFOs, and different ways of linking these shapes over time to different parameters. And then there's effects and other ways of messing with the sound. So basic principles apply across pretty much any synth that you're going to play with. Yeah. What else? Massive is also a really popular one. I've never actually used Massive, but I assume it's a subtractive synth like this as well. Cool. I'll answer some questions in the next couple of minutes, but first I just want to thank everybody for coming and close class down formally. Yeah, thanks everybody for coming. I really appreciate it. If you haven't followed this channel, you can click the heart above. If you want to send me money, that'd be great. Every time I get a donation from one of you guys, I'm like, oh, all right, I should really keep doing this. I shouldn't let myself, you know, slow down, get lazy. I want to do a good job because this is, I don't know, it's just nice to get the energy back in whatever form. If you want to send me money, if you just want to say thanks, it's nice to see you all here, see you all here in the chat. Sign up for the mailing list down below. Check out old classes. If you're new to Ableton, I did 7 introduction classes. You will find information about that below. Yeah, thanks for coming. So I will answer questions here now. Do I have a favorite VST synth? I really like the Arturia collection. It's at the studio that I work at, and so I've been using it. I used it all over this EP that's coming out by this artist Sullivan. There's a great single out already. Maybe I can just plug myself and my friend for a minute. But I produced an EP for my friend Catherine. We've got 1 single out, more coming soon. And I used the Arturia plugins all over it. And I finally bought them for myself at home now that I'm stuck at home. So these are all emulations of classic old digital and analog hardware synths. And I'm still getting to know them, but my favorite so far is this guy. I just love the sounds on this thing. I also have Serum, but you know, I don't make a lot of like dance music, and I find Serum just like really clean and modern sounding in a way that I don't actually find myself having that much use for the kind of music that I make. Maddie. Yeah, I teach Ableton live at Juilliard. I don't teach synths and stuff also except in the context of that Ableton class. And that Ableton class is more of like a composition class than a sound design class, although it's all kind of work together. So, yeah. Dreadbone. I've never really spent much time with a modular synth. I get the basic idea, and actually some of these Arturias are modular synths. I think there's other Buchlas, I forget. Yeah, I've got friends who have gone deep down this rabbit hole, and I admire them, and I think they make awesome sounds, but I'm just not really a hardware guy, or I haven't been in the past. I don't buy many. I don't have a lot of hardware. I'm the kind of person where you like tell me the name of a mic and it's out of my head instantly, right away. Like I just don't have a head for this stuff. I'm really working on it, getting to know my mics and preamps and famous classic stuff. But you know, since I don't have them, I don't know much about them. Yeah, I appreciate... Oh yeah, Arturia Pigments, free till July 3rd. Oh, cool. I've never actually used it, so I will check it out. Maybe it would be another good one to look at. I feel bad teaching the Ableton ones because you have to have Live Suite to use it. Wavetable, Operator, Analog. You'll have to have the most expensive version of Ableton to have these. So I'm inclined... I don't know if I put on my schedule that I want to hit each of these in turn. I don't use them myself that much, honestly. Oh, there's another good free one called Tal. Oh no, called Tunefish. I know some guys who just did a whole beat making challenge where the constraint was that they can only use Tunefish to make all of their sounds. So yeah, I'm going to do some more thinking about which kinds of synths I want to do in the future. But I want to do synths for the next couple of weeks. Yeah, an FM synthesis thing would be, of course, really smart to do. FM synthesis is where you take two waveforms and modulate each other's frequency with them. It's just another way to get complex waveforms out of two simple waveforms rather than tons and tons of sine waves. Yeah, wavetable is great. I definitely want to do a wavetable one. Yeah, Qbird, Serum can do so much. I really honestly just haven't spent enough time with it, so maybe I'll use this as an excuse to get deep in there. Jake, classes at Juilliard. I think there's just the one that I know about. It's definitely an outlier. The more music tech classes happen in Logic, and I don't know. I just got a weird foot in the door with their extension classes to teach Ableton. Yeah, Dreadbone. I'll just say a little more about frequency modulation. The DX7 is actually an FM synth, and FM synthesis was invented at Stanford, and they patented the chip that does it, and that one patent was in like whole generations of synthesizers, and their music school has tons and tons and tons of money now because they have that patent on FM synthesis. The simplest, I mean, it's actually really simple. You take a waveform, an oscillator, and think about its frequency knob. So the knob that you turn to make it a high pitch or a low pitch. Ooh, that's the frequency knob. Now modulate that pitch of the note with another waveform going really fast. So right now you can picture this waveform modulating my pitch of my other oscillator, and it goes ooh. But now if you do this really, really fast, ooh, eventually it's going faster than rhythm, and it becomes no longer a variation that you can hear as an oscillation, but it just creates another crazy tone. And different combinations of speed of these two waveforms just give you a huge range of possible sounds that then you shape with envelopes and filters and everything. So basically it's just another hyper efficient way to get rich tones out of only two oscillators, compared to additive synthesis where you need tons and tons of oscillators to make rich tones. Alex Baxter, great note. Arturia synths are on sale right now. I love them. I think they sound great, and they're all kind of, vibey and vintage in a way that I like. Yeah, Maddie, Operator is pretty opaque. I rarely can just start with Operator at 0 and make something that I like, unless I'm trying to make like a sine tone. Then it's really easy. It's great to just do simple stuff. I mean, you can do tons with it. People who are good at it make all kinds of things, and you can hear the huge range in the presets. But I find it it's just hard to imagine how the four operators are really interacting with each other to change the sound. Anyway, I'll think about which synths I want to do next. You'll get an email. Joe, if you want to use an envelope for the right-left speakers, should you use it in this plugin? Write a little more about what you're picturing doing. I'm not quite sure I understand. You want a different envelope? Envelope for what? Envelope for volume? Envelope for filter? Cool. For volume, I don't think that there's a way to, in this or any synth that I know of, have a different envelope for the left and right ears. So what I suggest you do is make two copies of the same instrument. So if here's my Helm Delio, I would make two copies of the sound. Maybe this one has a slow fade in, and I also want let me make this a little vibey. And then maybe I wanted this to be different somehow, like maybe it's an octave lower and has more sub and has a different envelope. Maybe it's slower. So we've got two different synths now. Next, you would take the audio effect called Utility and put it on and use it to pan one to one side. Or you could just use the pan pot here. And then you would play on both synths at once. My main instrument is piano. Piano is how I understand how notes work. But I've been playing a lot more guitar in the last year. I'm really studying. I want to be a good guitarist after a long time of being a bad guitarist. So my understanding on guitar is getting better as well. But I play piano, guitar, bass guitar. I love playing bass guitar. And I've done a lot of singing, choral singing, solo singing. I play berimbau also, and I'm working on a hand drum sometimes, hobby instrument. Cool. Any other questions? Oh, let me give a shout out about next class. Is Nick Revell still here? He could introduce himself. Yeah, let me tell you, Nick Revell is an awesome musician. He's a great violist. He has a really cool album of stuff that he made on a computer with just him and a microphone and viola. And he performs tracks from it live and improvises with Ableton. So yeah, you can check out his stuff here on his solo performance page. And oh yeah, he's on Twitch. Everybody go follow Nick Plays Viola on Twitch. I'll link down here. Yeah, he's going to give a concert and give us behind the scenes stuff about how he designs his live performance setups in Ableton. So go follow him, check out his shows. They're great. Cool. I'm going to call it a day. Thanks everyone for coming. I will see you on Saturday. Keep in touch. Bye.